Hi, my name is Pastor Kevin, and I welcome you on behalf of Palm Coast United Methodist Church. This is not our event, but it's a community event, and we rent our gathering space, but we thank you all for coming, and you're welcome to come to any of our worship experiences. I'm going to ask you at this time, before I welcome Heather, let's just bow our heads where we can have a word of prayer and thanks. Okay? Gracious Holy One, we break a moment of silence to render praises and thanksgiving to you, thanking you for the joy of this day. We ask your continued blessings be upon our country, our president, his administration, those who serve in various leadership capacities. We ask your blessings upon us here tonight, and as your people draw us closer to you and closer to one another. Continue to bind us together. Regardless of any political parties, Lord, we ask that you continue to remind us that you're King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Be with us in all that we do, say and think for your glory. In Christ's name. And the people of God said, Amen.
Well, this church is beautiful. Is it not? Yes. It's a really nice addition to Palm Coast. My children went to Palm Coast United Methodist, and they were Flagglers, as they call them. And I was telling my daughter about the new playground. She's 20 now. I was telling her about the new playground, and she said, kids today, they're just spoiled. So, big up after you spoil your children. A couple of housekeeping things. Ringers off. Ringers off. If you don't mind, we've got 2 film crews here, so ringers off. But you are free. I have permission. So you are free to Facebook live stream, or photograph, or video on your own phone. The restrooms are straight out that door, down the hallway. And we are going to do Q&A after Mr. Jolly's remarks. And you can just raise your hand and somebody will bring you a microphone. If you prefer not to speak in public, for whatever reason, then as I prefer not to speak in public, but here I am, then we have note cards, and you can write your questions down and we will ask them on your behalf. All right, so let me give the official welcome. Welcome to the Flagler County Town Hall. I'm Heather Bevan, and I'm one of your co-hosts. But on behalf of the Flagler County residents that are here in this room, let me welcome our friends from St. John's, Valencia, and Putnam. Okay, did anybody travel further than those 3 counties? Where are you from? All right, well, congratulations, my friends. You are the secret sauce to a healthy, functioning democracy. And tonight we have gathered not to talk about politics, but to talk about policy. Politics is a popularity contest. Think back to high school when that kid was running, that annoying kid, was running for class president. And he said, no more homework, ever, right? Or as many skip days as you want to take them, right? That's politics. I'm in the process of writing a book right now about my friendship with George McGovern, which has required extensive research into 1972. And it is shocking to me how many issues, God bless George McGovern. And it is shocking to me how many issues and talking points have remained unchanged. I regret to inform you, politics is about sound bites. But here's the good news for us here tonight. Policy is about substance. For a while now, we have voted for people in the past who had the best Twitter rants, Instagram filters, and memes. But as Americans, we must do more. We must go deeper. We must hold the people we entrust to higher standards. We must hold them accountable for their actions they take or they don't take that impact our daily lives. And to do that, we must understand the substance of policy. So tonight we invited policy analyst David Jolly to help us ignore sound bites and listen to substance, to help us understand the current rapid-fire approach to governance and what it may mean for us down the road, individually and collectively. Before we meet David, though, I have the distinct privilege of introducing our moderator, Barbara Goss. One of the best things about living in Flagler County is all the hidden treasure that lives here. As some of you may remember, Shirley Chisholm chose Flagler County to be her home in her final years. Well, let me tell you, Flagler County is equally lucky to have Barbara Goss. Barbara's first job was at the New York office of the NAACP, where she worked with other pioneering civil rights leaders. Is it true, Barbara, that you got to work with Medgar Evers?
What's that?
Is it true that you got to work with Medgar Evers?
Medgar Evers was there, but he was in the field, not at the national office.
Yeah, I mean,
However,
who doesn't want that on our resume?
however, Eleanor Roosevelt was there.
If you're very nice to me, I might introduce you to Barbara in person, actually. She worked at the Commission on Civil Rights before going to the CIA. She spent 29 years at the agency and was the first African-American female to conduct clandestine operations in the field. She even recruited covert agents. How many of you watch spy shows on TV? Yeah, they were written about Barbara. After retiring, Barbara did a bunch of other super secret analyst stuff for the government and private clients and made quite a name for herself in counterterrorism. Now, some of you, Flagler Countyans, probably know Barbara from her work here with the Flagler NAACP and the African American Culture Society. You probably thought Barbara was just like anyone else who comes here to retire. Oh no. Barbara's been watching. And I know for a fact on some of you she has a file. But tonight, Mr. Jolly, Barbara will be watching you.
Oh boy, all right.
Barbara Goss.
First, I would like to recognize a few people. First, you met Palm Coast United Methodist Senior Pastor, Dr. Kevin James Sr. And then we have Dr. Colleen Walsh Conklin, who spent 24 years on the school board. It's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, David Jolly. David was born in
Dunedin.
Believe it or not, I looked up the pronunciation of Dunedin. I looked at the little spiel that they give you. And then I had to ask him, how do you say that again? But it's Dunedin in Pinellas County, Florida. He was graduated from Pasco High, after which he received a Bachelor of Arts from Emory University and a JD from George Mason University. He worked with Florida Congressman Bill Young for 12 years. In 2014, after the death of Congressman Young, Mr. Jolly was elected to Congress. In 2017, after the death of Congressman, in 2017, after growing concerns about escalating hostility across party lines, he turned his attention to political and policy analysis. Today, you can find his fiercely independent but conciliatory analysis on MSNBC, CNN, HBO, NBC, as well as in printed media, Time, USA Today, Roll Call, The Washington Post, The New York Times, and the Tampa Bay Times. So you know how fortunate we all are to have Mr. Jolly here today.
Thank you all very much. Can we give another round of applause to Barbara? We have not met, but on the way over here, I read her bio, and I walked up and said, "You are an absolute rock star." And I'm excited to be here with you. I also want to recognize folks that very seldom get recognized, the ones who made this happen, starting with Heather. Can we give her a round of applause? And I know there were 5 or 6 others very deeply involved. And let me tell you, this speaks to the moment we're in. Because the way these events are happening across the state, many of you are part of the organizing community, is people are taking leadership in their own community saying, I want to stand up and have our voices heard and I want to do something. And they're doing it. This is not David Jolly calling around saying, where else can we have another town hall? These are organic town hall events where people are expressing their frustration and their concern about the direction of the state and the direction of the country. It's real. But I want to ask you a question. And listen, I'm a preacher's kid. I'm a person of deep and abiding Christian faith. I'm not here to evangelize my personal faith in the public square, but we are in a church. And so I want to say I am not a candidate. I'm not here to advance any partisan agenda. But we're going to talk about some hard truths about our politics and our political parties, and that's okay, because we have to talk about that. And I'm going to ask a question right now for all of the activists and the Democrats in the room who are fighting hard. Is this a great time to be involved in politics? It is. It is. Don't listen to the naysayers or the analysts or the pundits who somehow think that the pro-democracy coalition has taken it on the chin and it's dying and it's dead and the Democratic Party has nowhere to go. That's absolutely not the case. This is actually a moment where the Democratic coalition has stood up and said, in the face of what we believe to be unconstitutional, anti-democratic directions of our state and our country, we are going to stand in the gap and we are going to stand up and fight for people from all walks of life and for an economy that serves all people and protects the basic fundamental rights of all people. That is this coalition in this room. Many of you have mentioned your gratitude for my work on MSNBC. I want to simply say thank you for being a part of the MSNBC community. I mean that. There's no punchline to that. We live in a time where people get their news and information from any number of sources. And in a very heartbreaking way, traditional media is under-resourced and unable to staff the stories and to cover the stories that matter. I am grateful to have had the opportunity the last 8 to 10 years on cable television, but I want to thank you for being a part of that family, a part of the viewer family. For those who have not followed my work on MSNBC, I often say, you've probably saved a lot of money on counseling or calories or alcohol, whatever it is. Consider mightily contributing back to your community or your organizing committees here tonight. My wife and I live over in Pinellas County. We have 2 young children, 6 and 4. For those of you who have been through that chapter, every day is a Monday. Every day is a Monday. They inform every part of our life right now in a very special and real and sentimental way. Our 2 kids have now been to a total of 1 political rally. We also protect them from much of this environment. But they went to 1 rally. The rally they went to, as at the time a 5-year-old and 3-year-old, was at the Villages. Now picture a 5-year-old and 3-year-old at the Villages 2 weeks before the November election. Our young son is still marching around the backyard saying, "We're not going back." And that's okay. My own personal partisan preference. The Bible says, "Raise up your children in the way they should go." We're raising Democrats in our house. And we're okay with that. We are going to have time for as much Q&A as the evening will hold. I look forward to the conversation. I will say part of my involvement today in politics and part of what has driven my involvement in the national media space, I was a never good enough Republican, if you will, a Bush 41 Republican, who by the time I was coming up, the Tea Party wave was already kind of upon us, and I was pushing back against the attack on government. While I might have been a less government Republican at the time, I still think government has a responsibility to serve our veterans, to serve our seniors, to serve people in need, to provide for common defense, to provide for law enforcement. We pay for it. Government is us. Government is our tax money. What are we getting out of it? And so as the Republican Party began this evolution towards attacking government, to then under the Trump years, government is the enemy. And then when you just throw in what I consider the amoral to immoral, dangerous leadership of our president, that's my opinion, it doesn't have to be yours. I went to the House floor as a Republican member of Congress and called on Donald Trump to drop out of the presidential race in 2015. And I say this to build community, not to elevate my own standing or my own faith. I mean that. We're going to talk a little bit about faith tonight, because I think it's okay for Democrats to talk about faith. You're going to hear me talk about it a little bit. I called on Donald Trump to drop out of the presidential race in 2015 when he called on the Muslim ban. That might sound a little ironic. But I went to the House floor and I gave my profession of Christian faith. And I stood on the House floor and said, "Mr. Speaker, I stand here today as a born-again Christian believing in the saving grace of the God that I call my Christ. And the reason I get to do that today among the Congress and among the country is because of the fundamental freedom and personal protections to people's religion, to their speech, to their association, to their assembly. And if we start having a litmus test on people's faith, we've abandoned some basic constitutional protections. And if we have a presidential candidate that doesn't understand that, he needs to drop out of the race today." I was speaking to my white evangelical Republican performing friends, colleagues, and voters. And none of them listened to me. But it was a continuation of my journey, starting as a Republican who, even in 2013, supported marriage equality and gun control and climate science and campaign finance reform. I was never a good enough Republican, and Democrats already had their team. They didn't need me. And so I spent the next 6 to 8 years in the independent space, but as we were discussing earlier, I think in today's age, the independent space has been part of the pro-democracy coalition for the last 10 years. And I talk about the Democratic Coalition and have proudly shared my affiliation with the Democratic Coalition and my alliance with the Democratic Party for the last 8 years or so. As of, well, it gets better, ready? Because as of about 2 weeks ago, I'm a proud registered Florida Democrat. And I was sharing with Barbara, I've been out of politics long enough to tell the truth. And I don't hide the ball. And as of 2 weeks ago, we filed a committee, and I'm actively considering running for governor of the state of Florida. Look, I believe we are in a constitutional crisis right now. I don't believe we don't have to wait to be told we are in a constitutional crisis. When the President of the United States looks at the Congress and says, "I don't care about the laws you wrote or the budget that you enacted, I'm not going to abide by it and I'm going to ignore it," that is a constitutional crisis. That is the ignoring of the legislative authority that appears in Article 1 of the Constitution. When he says to the courts, "I don't care about your judgment or your orders, I'm going to do what I want to do," that's a constitutional crisis. When he says to individuals in this room and outside, I don't care about your due process. That is a constitutional crisis. The crisis, though, is not just because of the malfeasance of a president. It is because of the collapse of the Republican-led Congress. We have seen malfeasance of a president before, but it has been met with accountability from the courts or from the Congress. Malfeasance of a president alone is not a constitutional crisis, but the inability or unwillingness of the Congress or the courts to respond to that crisis by holding a president accountable, that creates the constitutional crisis. It is okay that we use language like that, because if we fail to do so, we ignore the import of the moment and the consequences that come with not standing up and having our voices heard. But I will also say this as a coalition. We will not regain authority in government, either in Washington or in Tallahassee or our local communities, by simply being a coalition that is known for what we are against. We must be against the direction of the country if you believe, as I do, that we are in danger. We must have a coalition that is raising our voices and saying, this is wrong. We're going to fight for fundamental rights for all people. We're going to fight for a government that works. We're going to fight for an economy for all people. We are going to fight to restore the power of the franchise of the individual. We are a pro-democracy coalition that is in this fight. But as we organize, and as those who are members of the Democratic Party choose to organize, what is it in this cycle that we are proposing, that we are promising, that if you entrust our coalition to lead in Tallahassee or in Washington, what are we going to do as that coalition? This is where we unlock the ability to truly stop the direction of the country. We are the party that believes in an economy for all people. We are the party that believes that government can work and serve our veterans and our seniors and our marginalized communities and those in need. We are the party that believes in standing up and restoring dignity to all people, regardless of who they worship or who they love or where they came from. We are a party that can be tough on crime, regardless if the person is a U.S. citizen, an immigrant, or a Tallahassee politician. But we can also be a party that lifts up and embraces everybody from every walk of life, wherever you came from, and recognizes and celebrates your contribution to our economy and to our culture. We can do both. We can be a coalition that says we believe in science and vaccines and medicine. And we believe there is a role of government in providing for the public health. And here's a crazy one. We believe in public education. It's a little crazier. We trust teachers. We want to empower teachers to teach our children. We want to pay teachers more. We want more funding for more public schools and more neighborhoods with more teachers who are paid more. It is not a threat to our 6-year-old and 4-year-old children to be exposed to diversity, a rich diversity of thought and academia. It is not a threat to our children to be educated. That makes them stronger and smarter and more prepared and better. Whether they follow academics or go into the trades or choose art or wherever they go, they will go stronger because of a powerful education. Get the politicians out of our classrooms just like we get them out of our doctor's office. That is the party that we can be. We can be the party that actually believes there's more we can do to prevent gun violence in the state of Florida. And I will tell you this is very important. Listen, this is an area, and Barbara and I can talk about it. I have moved my politics over the last 10 or 20 years. I admit that. I don't hide from it. I think that's a strength. I think it's okay to change your mind in politics. Guns is an area where I really grew a conviction and a passion that government must do more to protect our communities and our children from gun violence. But I also know this: gun owners are not the problem. Listen, that's different language for a Democratic coalition to talk about. Responsible gun owners are not the problem. The problem is irresponsible access, unlimited access to firearms. The problem is gun owners who don't store and lock their weapons and allow them to fall into hands that they shouldn't fall into. The problem is a statutory system that does not check for violent backgrounds, that looks the other way through our current background checks. We can have comprehensive and universal background checks. We can explore licensing and registration and even insurance if that ultimately will reduce gun violence in our communities. Responsible gun owners are okay with that because nothing about that infringes on their rights to own and operate a firearm. But to suggest that somehow we can do nothing more than we're currently doing is accepting violence in our streets and in our schools, and it's unacceptable, and we can be the party that says we're okay talking about more gun control in the state of Florida. I think fundamentally people want an economy that works for all people and grows and lifts up all people. They want a government that serves all people, and they want a government that protects fundamental and individual rights, whether those are your medical decisions or the practice of your own faith. Those are the basics. I think in 2026 in Florida, in 2026 in Michigan, even in California, a deep blue state, we are going to see the opportunity for the Democratic coalition, led by the Democratic Party, to emerge with new candidates, with new ways of talking about our fundamental values, not changing our values. Listen, I say this as an analyst, not as a candidate. If a Democrat walks into a room of Democratic activists and voters and says we're wrong on the issues and we need to change, throw them out. That's not the answer. That's not the answer. The Democratic Party is right on values, right on the issues. It does not require a change at all. It is simply about meeting voters in 2026 right where they're at. In Florida, that means addressing the affordability crisis that's driven largely by a property insurance crisis that's making housing more or less affordable for renters, retirees, and homeowners. We can have a state catastrophic fund to remove natural disaster perils from the private insurance market, cutting people's property insurance, lowering rents, stabilizing rents, actually lowering car insurance if we move the natural disaster perils from the car insurance market. We can invest in public education, and we can dramatically reform the current voucher system. If a school, a private school, receives a voucher, they should cap the rate of inflation on that student. It should be means tested for families, but most importantly, if a private school accepts public money, they should have to provide the exact same services that public schools do. That means if there's a first grader who's struggling to read and getting held back and needs an IEP, that voucher receiving school should have to provide the IEP for that student. I think in Florida there's a culture of corruption in Tallahassee that in the defense of Tallahassee politicians is largely allowable by law. So let's change the law. Let's have a dramatic campaign finance reform and ethics and transparency package in Tallahassee that reforms what Tallahassee politicians are allowed to do. We can bring clean, renewable energies into our utility market, deregulate the way Republicans have regulated it to drive down costs for consumers, but also protect our environment. We can invest in resiliency. We can embrace the ocean economy, the tourist economy in the state of Florida. There are so many things we can do. And I'll also say this, different language for Democrats. Just because a Republican has proposed it doesn't mean it's wrong. I know that sounds crazy. I know, I realize that. I have to check myself sometimes. Listen, the state Senate president right now has proposed a rural renaissance to spend $200 million providing additional infrastructure, education, access to health care in some of our poorest counties around the state of Florida. Democrats should celebrate that and work with the Senate president on that. It's okay to do that. Where there are laws in place that are helping our economy in Florida grow, it's okay to say we're going to do better and strengthen those. But fundamentally, where I think the contrast comes down, we've talked about a lot of issues, and Barbara, I'm sorry I took all this time, but I think so many things in this space are not about right versus left, they're about right versus wrong. And our state is going in the wrong direction. When we marginalize people, when we marginalize their vote, when we marginalize their identity, when we marginalize ethnicity, their places of origin, their choice of worship. We're going in the wrong direction. But that's what we've experienced in the culture wars of the last 6 years. When the economy is leaving some people behind, but letting others get whatever they want, that's the wrong direction. When you look around and you see a voucher system supporting private schools that now even families can't afford to go on their voucher, but there's no local public school, when their teachers aren't allowed to teach, that's going in the wrong direction, folks. It's not right versus left, it's right versus wrong. There's a values orientation to this Democratic coalition that in this change environment is going to allow the Democratic Party to see a resurgence in 2026. I believe that can happen in the state of Florida. And I would close with this. Our children, Laura and I, will inherit a state and will grow up in a state that will either affirm them and empower them or will stand in their way and keep them there. Our children will grow up in an environment where either our daughter has the same rights as our son or she doesn't. When I mention my journey to where I am today, it is an evolution. And it's okay. When people hit me with votes from 10 years ago or 15 years ago, let's talk about it. Part of building trust and building community is having honest conversations. But part of where I have arrived is not just been informed by my kids. The journey started before we had children. But what brings me into this community as a former Republican today? Because when it comes to raising our children, my wife and I will figure out how to navigate the bumps and the bruises and the heartaches. The stuff that will take 10 years off of our life in a matter of 10 days. I know that's coming. We'll get through it. But to provide for them the life that they deserve, the opportunities that they deserve, to provide for your grandchildren and your children the opportunities to grow up, to follow their pursuits, to follow their dreams, to love who they want to love, to pursue a career or a trade or the arts, whatever it is, to be celebrated and lifted up and not marginalized and kept down. To do that takes this entire room, and it takes this coalition, this movement we're seeing across the country right now. We have had enough, and we're not going back. And the way we get there is together. That's how we save this for our kids and for your kids. It's why I'm here, and it's why I'm proud to ally with each of you in this room tonight who showed up to do what's within reach for Christmas. Thank you all very much.
Okay, we can open it up for questions.
Okay, there will be people among you who will have microphones, so we want you to really
Just gonna fan
make
myself with this.
Mr. Jolly sweat.
I already am, I'm sorry.
I also want to recognize Jim and Cornelia Manfrey. Jim Manfrey, remember, was our last Democratic sheriff in Flagler County. Open for question.
Okay, can we have the first question? The gentleman in the back. Okay.
I don't need a microphone, I can talk loud. Thank you for cutting I'll just speak loudly until it does. You had said something about removing the catastrophic damage from private insurance to some people. But we keep hearing from the Trump administration about how they want to move all these services to the states, one of them being FEMA.
Yeah.
Now, it may not be so bad in Nebraska to have Nebraska deal with their own FEMA things, but here in Florida, that would be fairly expensive, I would have to imagine.
That's
So how would mechanically, how would that work? How would Florida set their own fee, and how would that get paid for?
Yeah.
So that's a great question, and I would tell you, the other reason I'm a Democrat is I believe in math, and I'm not sure Republicans always understand math. Look, there are a lot of populist ideas that feel and sound good, but at some point you have to deal with the responsible administration of government. FEMA has served well for decades and has been there when families need it. This is an area where I don't think we necessarily need to reflexively oppose block granting federal funds to a state to deal with the administration of natural disasters, but we should ask some very hard questions. Will Florida be able to deal more efficiently or less efficiently with it? I think under the DeSantis administration, the answer is clear. We would deal less efficiently with natural disasters, and who knows where that money would end up going. When the governor had an opportunity to influence distribution of the COVID vaccine, the first batches went to Ocean Reef Club. How would this state government in Tallahassee deal with natural disaster relief? I trust FEMA to be a first responder in providing for housing, for hotel, for food, for disaster care. And it bothers me that Donald Trump would have the notion of saying we're going to try to shut it down. I think he likes to deal with angry populism. I like to deal in reasonable populism and kind populism. He saw people angry after the storms. Listen, our community was directly impacted. We lost, I believe, 16 people in Pinellas County in that first storm last year, right in our personal community, drownings from people that didn't leave the rising mud. The anger is real. The bikes and the Elon Musk cars were catching on fire in people's garages because of the water rushing in. The anger was real. People lost their homes. Disaster is hard. We saw it in California with the fires. And so I think Donald Trump jumps on the anger and throws out an idea that suggests he's fighting for you, when really at times he's fighting against you. I would suggest very quickly, FEMA is an annual budget process where we provide money for emergencies. That happens through the normal budget process, through the emergency budget process, but it's discretionary money where Congress can decide, like that, we're going to spend more money on the disaster. The insurance market is a very different policy-driven cost. And so right now, if you take your insurance policy and you go to your insurance agent and say, hey, what is the price of an insurance policy if I remove natural disaster perils? It's called X-Wind, is the name of the policy. Many policies drop by up to 60%. 60%. Now, most people can't do that because your mortgage company requires you to have hurricane coverage. So my proposal would be remove natural disaster perils from the private insurance market, put it in a true state catastrophic fund, not citizens, a true state catastrophic fund, where the state of Florida funds a catastrophic fund, choose your revenue source, to say we're going to cover natural disaster perils in our state, reduce property insurance for homeowners and retirees, even for those who own rental units, driving down the cost of property insurance and restoring affordability in Florida's property insurance market. Republicans might call that socialism, but I don't care if it works. I really don't. To me, I think the government has a role to step in where private markets have failed. It's true in health insurance, where I think the right answer at the federal level at least is Medicare for all who want it, and it's true at the property insurance level as well.
Okay, the young lady
think in
with
the
glasses in the back. Well, yes, you can. All right, she's standing now.
I know there's not a lot of young ladies today, so I understand that. My name is Vaughn. I'm from an organization called Florida Student Power. We're statewide. We're young people, high school and college students who organize around issues with our environment, the education system, particularly public education, and also immigration. I can have a multitude of questions for you today, but my only question is, in particular, at the moment, there's a lot of contention even within the Democratic Party in which a lot of young people feel not included,
Yeah.
not listened to. And I think it shows in this room that there's not a lot of us in here. So I think for me, the only question I would have is, as young people who are going to be future voters in this upcoming governor's election and the upcoming presidential election, I know we're all waiting, I would want to see if it could be possible for you to possibly commit to a young constituent's town hall in particular. Because us as young people don't yeah, that's my question.
I love that question, thinking it's moi, right?
Yeah.
I had to ask her twice when I came in. It's a beautiful name. I think you're right. I'm looking around this room, and I'm including myself. The ability of most of us in this room to communicate with younger people, either in person or digitally, is probably a challenge. And if we don't grow that coalition, we're going to be in trouble. I do think what is unique in this environment in 2026 and unique in Florida is the affordability crisis is a thread that every community feels. Every community. From young people who are saying, can I get a job where wages allow me to have access to housing and health care in the state? Do I have student loan debt? Do I have debt? How about a car? How about car transportation? Can I be mobile in Florida in a way that allows me to reach the career I'm reaching for? That's an affordability crisis. If you're a senior living in a condo complex, suffering the additional cost of the post-Surfside legislation, important public safety legislation, but it created a financial burden on a lot of retirees living in condos, that's an affordability crisis. If your family's looking around for what are my schooling options, truly it is an affordability crisis when you're having to supplement the ability for your children to either drive further to a public school because there's no longer one in your neighborhood, or because you're attending a school that you thought the vouchers would cover but they're not. That's an affordability crisis. If you're a laborer who is working as I saw this week, painting houses with a broken arm because you can't afford to take time off, that's an affordability crisis. Does that move every young voter? Of course not. There's also a different language to it, right? There's a different context to it. And the only way we bring back a coalition that can truly win is by starting early, starting now, as though the campaign is only 2 weeks away. We can't wait until next October. We have to build a coalition that is broad and deep, that has stakeholders and evangelists in every community across the state, geographically, socioeconomically, demographically, every subject matter space that says, I believe that there's a coalition willing to fight for me. Whether I'm a young person, a retiree, whatever my age, whatever my walk of life, I see in this coalition a set of values where I know we're going to be fighting together to lift everybody up, and that includes me, even if I'm 18 years old. That's a different language. But I would suggest in contrast to see the current incumbent party not care about economic growth for the younger generation, to think that the younger generation only cares about college debt and marijuana should be offensive. Because we're bigger than what the other side wants to make us out to be. But it starts by building community. Look, the contrast to chaos is not order, it's community. If we can build community with young people and retirees alike, watch out next year in 2026. Because this coalition becomes a Democratic Party-led coalition that can change the world. I really believe it.
There was a question from the lady just in front of the last speaker. Would you ask your question, please?
I don't know if I can speak eloquently as the young lady here, but my concern is, my concern is what are you going to do to get the young people in? Trump is winning.
That's right.
Because all those jerks are watching wrestling. I mean, I beg your pardon? Yeah. I mean, but that's very powerful.
Yeah.
And I saw it when I volunteered
Yeah.
at the last election.
Well, I think the answer might be we learned to wrestle. But look, the real answer is we need more people like like moi and more people like Maxwell Frost who can carry out a message for us. Because dropping any one of us in front of a podcast isn't going to do it. This is the hard work of organizing. And I think Moi should be commended for being here. Because this is someone who's stepping up and saying, I want to lead. And we need leaders from within the younger community to be a part of this coalition and to give them a voice. To give them a voice. Listen, there have been constitutional amendments that have been on the ballot. I'll just be honest, again, been out long enough to tell the truth. I'm not necessarily for recreational marijuana in the state of Florida. That's not something that I'm passionate about. But more than 50% of the state said they are. And I think we need a government that responds to the majority of voters and says, if a constitutional amendment got more than 50% of the vote, then the governor should introduce legislation saying, we're going to do this. That's true on codifying the Roe Casey framework for reproductive freedom as well. The voters of Florida have spoken, and I think part of what turns off a lot of voters, but particularly younger voters, is they look at politics, and frankly often a two-party system where they don't see identity for themselves. And why should they participate? If all it's doing is trying to quiet their vote, to quiet their franchise, to say we're going to have new voter ID laws, if you're in college, we don't want you to vote, to look around at a diverse state and say, particularly in communities of color, we're going to make it harder for you to access the ballot box. In lower income communities, we're going to make it more challenging. That we are going to set up rules where you have to hit 60% of the state population to actually directly engage in democracy. People should be turned off by that. And I think if you're a young person just starting out saying, I got more important things than politics, I got to figure out where I'm making an income and where I'm laying my head tonight. That's how we meet young people where they're at and say, we're going to fight with you to solve this, but we need you to come along with us and be our voice. We need moi, we need Maxwell Frost, we need others evangelizing our message more than any of us in this room.
We have a question from a veteran in the back, in green. Could you, does he have the microphone?
Yes, I do. My wife asked me, and she knows that you were a Republican first and you changed to Democrat. Her question is, how can we trust that you're not turning your back tomorrow? And then my second question, I'm as a veteran for 35 years, I don't know how a veteran voted for Republican in his life when for over 35 years, not a single Republican voted for us trying to claim our benefits. How can you stand up for us against the criminal in chief right now?
Yeah. So thank you for that. I want to do one thing. I know more than just yourself has served in uniform. Let's give a round of applause to everybody who's serving. I know we all mean that sincerely, but this is an issue where today's Democratic coalition has to talk a little different language. We can't be afraid of saying, we are the party that's going to fight for care for our veterans, for health care, for services, whatever it might be. We're a party that can embrace a strong national defense and return patriotism and can celebrate the flag. Frankly, we saw Vice President Harris lead us in that conversation at the last Democratic National Convention. It's also an area, though, just like we were speaking with Maul, where I think it is, look, last night I spent some time, Heather was there with the Democratic Veterans Coalition. We need to grow that publicly and begin to retake the space. What DOGE is doing is disrupting care to people who need it, services to people who deserve it, who not only paid for it through their taxes, but paid for it through their service and uniform. That's the real life consequence of Republican policies today. We need to retake that plane. We can do that. That's just about speaking to issues that in the past maybe we haven't spoken to. Now the second question is that it sometimes seems a much harder question, but it's a much more personal one. How can we trust a former Republican? I get it. I don't trust any current Republicans. I think that's a good faith question. I'm going to invoke one of my predecessors. I mean this with respect. Completely mean this with respect. Many of us watched the journey of former Governor Charlie Crist. Some of you may have supported him or not. That's fine. not a criticism of Charlie, what I'm about to say. Most of us could finish his sentence when he would say, I didn't lead the Republican Party left me. Right? Maybe that's true for Charlie, but that's not my story. David Jolly left the Republican Party, and I'm proud to have left the Republican Party. I don't blame the Republican Party for my journey. I test a different theory in politics. Is it okay to grow and to change your mind? I think it should be. I was a Republican elected twice in a district that President Obama was also elected twice. I woke up every day in a 50-50 district having to think about my own community, not about my party. I would look at 95% of my colleagues who only had to worry every morning in Congress about their party. And they didn't get it. They still don't get it today. One of the fundamental pro-democracy pieces we can change is to undo gerrymandering. System and a corrupt campaign finance system, once you get elected, most people never have to worry about accountability again. And it drives the behavior we're seeing. There might be 20 members of Congress today who actually have to stand up and fight for their community. I happen to be in one of those districts. And so, as a Republican, as I mentioned, I was okay speaking about marriage equality, and climate science, and gun control, and campaign finance reform because I believed it, but because it also made good politics. Right? There was a reward for actually talking about issues where people really were. Greater background checks to keep guns out of the hands of potentially violent criminals. That's supported by 80% of the country, I believe. It's only because of gerrymandering that we don't see the movement, and because of a campaign finance system that has today's Republican Party in the grip of the gun lobby. If we can unwind that, the issues aren't that hard. If we drop the R's and D's, the issues aren't that hard. On reproductive freedom, I wrongly conflated growing up in an evangelical home. I'm still a member of an evangelical church. But I wrongly conflated my religious view of life with being anti-Roe. That's true. As I grew and as I served in Congress, I was the only Republican to vote against the Planned Parenthood investigation. When Republicans went to remove $400 million in funding from Planned Parenthood, I wrote the legislation that said if you're going to remove that funding, let's at least move the $400 million over to community health centers, so we're not defunding women's health care. That was part of my journey. I eventually got to where I realized the Roe Casey framework is exactly the right constitutional framework to protect individual liberty, to ensure bodily autonomy for women to keep decisions between their doctor and themselves, and I'm proud to fight for it. That's not the Republican Party leaving me, that's me leaving the Republican Party. And I'm okay with it. Now, why should people leave me? Because we have to start to build a relationship of trust. So here's what I don't tell you also. For those who have seen my journey on TV, thank you. I would also suggest to just point out, because look, if we get into this race, this will be one of the first hits. Right? Oh, he just became a Democrat, or Charlie Crist 2.0. Hopefully you've seen part of my journey and you have reason to believe it. If not, we're going to start this race very early should we decide to get in, so that we can build community and build trust. I was in Orlando earlier this week, or I don't know what day it is, sometime in the last 7 days, sitting with the Council of Black Ministers. And I said, listen, I'm not here to ask for your political support. I'm here to listen, to begin a relationship of trust, to begin an alliance and a community where I understand better how to give voice to this coalition, but I'm in a position to empower you to raise your voices. And I said the last thing we need, and I think what people should resent, is a candidate who in September or October runs around saying,
gentlemen please stand?
Hi there. Thank you very much for coming tonight. One of the most encouraging things I've heard recently is our new Pope Leo redefining woke. And I was really encouraged by that. And plus, we need to take back the language. And what I want to know is, I can't imagine that here in Florida that there aren't some very persuasive religious church leaders, spiritual leaders, to enlist on our side, because somehow the language has been dominated to think that being progressive means secular, which means godless.
That's right.
And we've got to, change our image. Yes, Christian values are American values.
Yeah.
And so what steps can we take to bring recognizable spiritual and church leaders into our image?
Yeah. Whew, that's a tough question. Is the pastor around? I love this question, and I'm not going to take 15 minutes on this. I'll probably take an hour and 15 minutes. I don't think progressive evangelism died with Jimmy Carter. I think it's alive and it's well. And I think many of the voters we have seen in the last few years perform for the Democratic coalition have been white evangelical women sitting in the church pews on Sunday mornings who have decided based on their own compass that we are going in the wrong direction and we've got to turn things around. Here's where I think Republicans have made a lot of ground and we have to unpack it. Republicans created a narrative and a framing that Christian America is under attack by government, that any community of faith, and I say Christian recognizing this could apply to the Jewish community, the Muslim community, choose it, or no faith community at all, include the agnostic community or atheist community in this, that somehow government has been attacking your freedoms. It is deeply rooted, though, that Republican view is deeply rooted in a view of Christian nationalism. It really is. There's an implicit bias when Republicans say that the Christian church is under attack by government, when many times what they're pointing to is the government simply trying to level the playing field between people of faith and those of no faith at all. And so I do think it requires a couple different things. At least for those in the Democratic coalition that choose to practice faith, they should be open about it, not hide it. I'm speaking about it tonight, not to evangelize, but because I think it's part of an identity in today's Democratic coalition that we should be comfortable accepting. I was in Broward County the other night, and when I spoke of faith, they applauded. I don't know that we would have seen that in a Democratic coalition 6 years ago. Maybe, maybe not. But I think for Democrats of faith, they need to realize it's okay to talk about their faith before they start the war over how the Constitution should be applied and how the law applies. Count me in the coalition of people who are church hurt, who look at the direction of the church and don't quite understand exactly how it's arrived where it's arrived in the last 10 years. I think the way to empower a church is to throw away the crutch of relying on a political party to put into law that which you've been unable to change hearts and minds to advance. And I do. And so I think it is important that just as we talk about cultural issues and fundamental issues of freedom and protection, whether it's reproductive freedom, whether it's advocating for the LGBTQ plus community, to recognize that, hey, church, if you want to evangelize a different teaching based on faith, we are also going to fight for your freedom of faith and religion to evangelize your message. But as for the Constitution, we are going to ensure and insist that everybody be provided the fundamental personal liberties that they are due. We are not going to allow the church to indoctrinate government. It simply can't happen. But that doesn't mean failing to speak the language of the church and to promise that we're going to fight for religious freedom as well.
Sorry.
So we've got tons of people want to question. So I'm going to move, Ashley,
I'm going to I was just about to use my teacher voice. I'm going to move this microphone over here, so this side of the room, if you want to come up, you can line up. Patsy's got two people who've been standing here for a long time that have questions, but then Patsy, will you move kind of to the center? It just gets a little dark in the back, and I think it's kind of hard to see people who are raising their hands. And I'm going to have Cindy, you do the same thing, kind of move in the center. And you guys are welcome to get up, go to the microphones, or just raise your hand and we'll try our best to get to you. But
And we'll do lightning round, and I'll keep my answers short. Guys, I'm the problem here, not you all. I know that. I apologize.
Mr. Dolan, apparently everybody wants a piece of your wisdom.
Can we get the question from the gentleman raising your hand in blue? Yes.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Stevenson. Before you throw me out, I've been a resident in this county for 6 months. We're shopping in Florida. So I have home in Georgia, my wife and I live there. But I grew up in St. Petersburg, a little south city. And Florida, no matter where I live, is my home. So my question is, we love our beaches, but we're losing our beaches.
Yeah.
Erosion, climate change, and other issues are taking our beaches away from us. What do you, as a group, feel that we can do to change this? And how can we get our beaches back, and how can we get more returning Floridians, not say transplants, but returning Floridians back home? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would just say what should inform our advocacy is an understanding that there are two areas where we can address environmental degradation in the state of Florida. The first is simply through the annual budget process of your county, your municipality, the state, or the federal government. We get one bite at the apple every year. Budgets are values. Are we investing each year in climate resiliency and hardening infrastructure and elevating and undergrounding utilities and providing for beach erosion and beach renourishment? Those are all part of the annual budget process. We can choose how we spend money on that, so we should advocate for that. The longer term problem is, are we restricting the emissions and greenhouse gases that are ultimately raising the temperature around the globe and creating the true change in climate? I don't think we're doing enough to do that. I think we are at a crisis moment, and so we have to advocate for longer term policy changes that ultimately protect our environment. But immediately right now, every annual budget process, we can be advocating for greater funds for climate resiliency efforts.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Jolly. I've been following you on MSNBC for years, and I can see through this room, he's an honest broker.
Thank you.
I watch you all the time, and I draw from the land, so I can see
Thank you.
My husband is here as well, and we're both retired military.
Fantastic.
Every day, I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
And thank you, by the way, for addressing the gerrymandering. That is really serious here in Florida, as you already know. But my question is, before I go to that part, thank you for saying that you didn't have an appetite for the ban on lesbians. What did it for me was day one, when I'm going to grab them by the pee, and I'm going to shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. I think but some people just have an appetite or tolerance for putting that behind them. That's just rock and roll talk or whatever. We got to raise the standards. We got to raise the standards because this is not
That's right.
It's not okay for someone to sell 5,000 lives a day.
That's right.
Okay, so my question is, I'm not a one-issue voter, and a lot of people don't understand it. When I vote, it's not for me. It's for my children, their children, and those who are unborn. So that is why I put the work in.
Yeah.
So what can we do to try to fact check? Because people don't.
Yeah.
They just eat whatever they're fed. And I spend a lot of time fact checking to the point where I have to disengage. So what can we do to try to
Thank you for that question. Look, this is where you get your information truly matters, right? The traditional news environment is so critical right now at a time that it's under stress and under-resourced. I would say we all can't do all things. I mean, I believe in something, a true philosophy. We have to do what's within reach for each of us. For some, the greatest level of activism is just promising to register to vote and show up next November, right? Life has too many other distractions and demands for your school, for your church, for your family. For others, it's the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to commit myself to learning 5 important facts in today's environment so that I can have a conversation, right? So I remember our neighbor who is a MAGA supporter but not a Kool-Aid drinker, right? And he came to me after the Zelensky-Donald Trump showdown in the Oval Office where J.D. Vance stressed down Zelensky. And we were talking tree trimming or something. He said, hey, what do you think about that Oval Office meeting? And I said, well, I'm not sure. What do you think about it? He said, well, do you think they're going to fire Zelensky? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, do you think they're going to fire him? I said, well, he's the president of Ukraine. And he said, yeah, but he's not the real president, right? He said, that's just Russian land, right? Now, listen, in his defense, his opinion was based on where he got the news, right? But in that moment, I was able to briefly explain to him the geopolitical history of Ukraine, but in a way to simply try to tell him, listen, you've been misled, and in a way that invited him into the truth and to the light. Now, we can't all become masters of every topic. Look, a lot of times at MSNBC, we deal with breaking news, right? You got to do the best you can with the news you have, but I would suggest we are in an environment where the lies are so common, but they're also somewhat predictable, to think about it. Go home and say, what are 5 areas where I know I can commit to the facts? And just be prepared for when those moments occur and to share those facts. Is it, for instance, that when Donald Trump left office the first time, 25% of our entire national debt over 200 plus years of history, 25% occurred during his first 4 years in office. So don't talk to me about fiscal responsibility and DOGE. Is it about the fact that DOGE is going to have virtually no impact on our federal budget or on our debt? That's a fact. Right? They might not like to hear it, but it arms us for conversation. We're never going to keep up with the fires. We're not. But that doesn't mean that we're without power. I love the question. Thank you.
Gentleman here, yes.
Hello. My
Yes.
name is Janet Sullivan. I'm the chair of the local Flagler County Democratic Party.
I'm sorry. I asked this gentleman here to stand up, please. Yes, you. Would somebody give him a microphone, please?
I got a loud voice.
Whether it's guns, whether it's the aerospace industry, whether it's chicken farmers, or whether it's Joe's widgets, one of the biggest problems I see in government is lobbyists. What can be done to reduce the power of lobbyists?
Oh, I love that question. I wish I had all night, so I ended up on a profile on 60 Minutes about 10 years ago because I suggested one simple one-page bill that no city member of Congress should be able to solicit a campaign contribution. Think about it. Okay? We have a fairly corrupt to very corrupt campaign finance system. Now, I will say, and listen, I was a former lobbyist, okay? I was a former lobbyist. Listen to me, I mean this. I don't think that the crisis is in advocacy and giving voice, right? Your county, your city, your water district, your school district, they have lobbyists. They have people that go in front of legislators and say, here are our priorities, here's our case, we wish it to be heard. The Constitution protects the right of redress. The issue is money. It's money in politics. This is an area where I have evolved significantly. As a young lawyer, I would make a case that money in politics is speech. Now I'm for the complete public financing of campaigns. I think we have the most corrupt campaign finance system in the country. And so when I introduced that legislation, it was simply to say, if you're a sitting member of Congress, put down the phone and get to work and stop taking the money. I think campaign finance reform is an area that we can tackle as a coalition. Now, Madam Chairwoman.
Hello, I am still Janet Sullivan. And I notice that you continue to use the phrase Democratic coalition, not Democratic Party. And I really appreciate that. And I want to say to all of you, I know there are a lot of Democrats here because I recognize you. I'm going to assume there are a lot of people here who are not Democrats, but care about the same issues and have the same values. And whether you're old or young, like moi, then this moi is old, that moi is young. We need to be together. And I invite you all to join this local Democratic coalition so that we can really be with one voice. I will always be a Democrat. You may always be an NPA. I don't care what your registration is, but let's all be together and make a difference in this county. Feel free to contact us at any time, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
I have a question. Are you waiting to get to the mic?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, before we have a lady over here that wants to say something.
Hi, my name is Janet. This is crazy, but it's something I've been thinking about since the election and given the immorality of our current president. And it all comes down to money. Everything has been decimated: veterans, education, NOAA, FEMA, everything. Why are we sending all of our taxes to Washington to be stolen? You know, is there if everything is going to have to come back to the states, then the states need more funding. I know it's probably illegal, but it's something that goes through my mind. And is it time for a modern day tea party?
Thank you. There is a resistance movement that's about 40 years old to say we're not paying income tax, and it'll end up putting you in about 8 years of an audit process. Look, I think the fundamental values question is, are we getting from our government the services we deserve, the representation we deserve, and frankly, does it reflect the value of the money we're sending, but also the values of our country and our community? And I think the reason we're here tonight is we probably would all say the answers to those questions are no.
Gentlemen, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to hear that you're going to mount a values-based campaign. We need a values-based campaign. You're talking about voting in 2026. I'm trying to remember the exact quote that the malignant narcissist who serves as a head of our government right now made, but there's not going to be any, if I remember what he said, sort of, he said, there won't be any need for any more elections. Now, given that midterm elections usually go bad for the incumbent president, I could really see him being quite motivated to prevent such elections. Now, that might not be true at the state level, but certainly I could see him trying to do that at the federal level. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think when the president says things like that, we should choose to believe him, because if we ignore it, we risk our democracy. And that threat, I believe, is real. I think where we will see an infringement on democracy is through continued voter suppression measures that are dressed up as voter security and election integrity, when we know that data doesn't support the additional legislation in red states. I think that will be real, where we have seen secretaries of state elected in states that are truly ambassadors of the president. We have seen a new willingness to pervert democracy and election results. What I worry we might see in this election cycle is the weaponization of prosecutors to go after leading Democratic candidates. I think that's real, right? We've seen it with law firms, we've seen it with the media, we've seen it with universities. There's no reason to think that they're not going to do that to Democratic candidates to try to chill the public square. I think that's real. I don't know how we get through it other than we go through it and we win. That's the only strategy. Go through this and win. And I think we can do it.
Well, thank you for being one of the leaders.
Yes.
Oh.
Sorry.
No, my question to you is what I've seen is in what kind of. Oh, okay. Okay, what I've seen, is that on yet? Yeah, okay. What I see when I watch the news and read about this and try to learn about it is there's something is happening from the very top, the top level, right? He's plugging every single option that we have. For me, the biggest problem is this onslaught of chronic lies and misinformation.
Yeah.
And it's coming and coming and coming. But wherever you get a hole, wherever you can go through, it's blocked again. And we have to start again. What plan does the Democratic Party have to combat this constant onslaught of BS, basically?
Yeah.
And I became a Democrat after seeing Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
That's who made me into a Democrat.
Yeah. Look, I do think we are in a historic moment. We've never seen a president like Donald Trump, truly. I mean, we haven't. We've seen some similarities in past presidents. We've seen the willingness to enrich oneself. We've seen the willingness to break the law, as we've seen impeachments in the past. But frankly, his skill of always commanding the public space with noise and disinformation is very real. And so it is smothering. And in some ways, we're not going to turn that tide and combat it. It is the one thing he continues to do. And you can't ultimately quiet a bully until you make them go away. And so I think what you are seeing emerge as a Democratic strategy, it goes back to my opening comments. We can't just be known for what we're fighting against. We have to be known for what we're fighting for. We have to build a coalition that appeals to people and makes people realize, I don't want that noise anymore. I don't want that division anymore. Sure. Listen, this is, you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? There's no perfect salve for this. But if we stop fighting for the incremental wins, we lose the entire battle. And we know that. And so what we have to do right now is what's within reach. We win key races. We take back the House in 2018. If Democrats take back the House, Elon Musk will be in front of a congressional hearing the next week. That's within reach. Get right here, sure.
There's a lady in back of you, the man standing that I had called before. Yes, in back of you. The lady, would you please stand? Yes. You're next.
I think I'm really quick. It's just really quick.
I'm sorry. I think we have some confusion here. This lady needs to be given a microphone.
Hi guys, my name is Madeline Probst. I am a student at Florida State University and a very proud 5-generational Floridian. I'm seeing with my peers and with members of my community that they do not remember Florida as a swing state, let alone a blue state. As a proud Democrat, my personal policy is informed by our predecessors like Bob Graham. However, in a state where civic education has been so downgraded, my peers in my community don't know how our government works and don't see that version of Florida anymore. They see the version of Florida with an 1 million voter deficit towards the Republicans. How do you plan to not only get attention from the young people, but also to inform them, knowing that the way that we were raised and educated in this state is hostile towards blue policy.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm just going to quickly revisit some themes. One is, I think we all agree, we had a conversation here, we've got to bring back civics education. We absolutely do. We have to raise up students who have a better understanding of their personal rights, their personal privileges, the opportunities that a government should be creating for them, the environment a government should create. So we need to enrich that. But I would also say, to your point, this is so critical. Whether I'm a candidate or not in this race, I truly believe the way back for Democrats, a Democratic-led coalition, is to return to some of the old school politics that we saw from Bob Graham and Lawton Chiles and others. Democrats will be outspent in the state of Florida 2-1. If Democrats spend $100 million on the governor's race, Republicans will spend $200 million. We know that. Yeah, it's simple to say they'll outspend us, we've got to outwork them. It's more than that. We have to start now building coalitions in communities across the state that become such a powerful movement that is seen as being different. It's got to look and feel different than past campaigns. And so, yes, we have to raise resources to touch voters digitally. We have to invest in voter registration, infrastructure that doesn't exist in any parts of the state for the Democratic Party. We have to register voters who are prepared to turn out and vote for Democratic candidates. But it also means the old retail trust relationships that you build in communities. That means speaking the language in the Panhandle about tighter labor markets because of the Republican crackdown on immigration. It means speaking the language of the faith community. It means going into communities in South Florida saying, wait a minute, did you really think when you were supporting Donald Trump that you were going to see the revocation of TPS? Did you really think you were going to see people apprehended taking out the trash or showing up to comply with their immigration officer? The way we change votes is not by sending a candidate into these communities next October. It's by having us in the community now saying, listen, in this community, I'll tell you right now, not to just give a shout out to Heather, but across the state, we've now seen this. In Fernandina Beach, it's Shelley. In Bradenton, it's Tony. In Miami, it's Lourdes. There are organizers who are currently recruiting and bringing people out saying, let's create change. The protest that I heard that it happens here every month now down in Volusia, I think, that is led by a citizen who says, we are going to mobilize. The candidate just has one job equal to everybody else's job in a campaign. It's no greater or no less. To the extent there's any leadership required, it is how do we give voice to everybody but allow everybody's voices to be amplified? That means being in communities right now so that by next October, no matter how much they're spending, people actually believe that, look, there's a coalition over here that I see is going to fight for me and fight for change, and I want to be a part of that. That is winning hearts and minds before it's ever winning a vote. We've got to bring that back if we've got a shot as Florida Democrats.
Good evening. My name is Colin Conklin. I served 24 years on the local school board here. I really want to talk about vouchers, but please don't repeat sound bites like that. We teach civics education in Florida. It's been hijacked in Florida. Courses have been removed in Florida. How we teach history has been changed in Florida. But our teachers are teaching civics in Florida. It just may not be the version that we all particularly care about. Vouchers. I'm curious as a candidate, how are you going to address the runaway train that vouchers have become?
Yeah.
5 years ago, we had 138 students that took a school voucher totaling about $800,000. This year, it is going to divert $17 million in 5 years. $17 million to private schools. In 2023, they changed the rules where anybody can get a voucher, right? It used to be before that there was an income level, there was a need not being met, there was even bullying. They couldn't get enough families to take the voucher. So now anybody can take a voucher, and 69% of those that use the voucher system were previously attending private schools. Only 13%, and the other about 18% are kindergartners, but only 13% are students who previously attended a public school. There is no income level. There is no reason. It is also for homeschoolers. It is wide open. It is going to cost this state this year $4 billion. How in the world is that going to be maintained? And they're talking about in 2027 having no cap.
Yeah.
No cap. So there's no accountability. Those are your dollars. Those are our dollars. Zero transparency, zero accountability. How are you going to, in 2 years, when there's going to be a large number of individuals who are benefiting, they're buying their vote. How are you going to counter that? I don't have an issue with choice.
Right.
At the end of the day, have schools that people don't want to leave, right? But there's no level playing field.
That's right.
So,
You just laid out our platform, by the way. and should we run, we will have a broad policy committee, and you're welcome to be a part of it. Because listen, I'm about to talk through some things. Campaigns are linear. The candidate should learn on the trail, right? Some of my initial proposals in this space have grown into new territory because people like you around the state who have served educated me along the way. This is where this is a coalition. But to your exact point, and you used the statistic, about 70%, 69% of families receiving vouchers were already in private school. Republicans gave away the plot in the last cycle when they said, we're going to do away with means testing. It simply then became a moment where they could move money into the private school system and abandon public schools. And I think very importantly, we're going to tick through this quickly. The first thing we have to do, every time we open our mouth about education and vouchers, we have to be talking about reinvesting in public education, reinvesting in our teachers, making public education in Florida the greatest in the entire world. We have to lead with that. Because ultimately, public schools in Florida still today are where students have the greatest access to excellence in academia, to the trades, to the arts. Very few private schools offer the same offerings you will get in a public school. Only in very wealthy Tony communities in a few pockets of the state do you see private schools able to compete with the services of public schools. So we stand up for public schools. But the three things I very quickly talk about: bring back means testing in an aggressive way. If we're going to have a voucher system that's truly for families in need, make it for families in need, not for the 70% of students who already had it. Secondly, I think instead of going after the families who receive vouchers, we go after the schools who are failing to serve the families. And so we say, if you're a school that's going to accept Johnny or Sally on a voucher, you have to cap the rate of inflation for that student at, say, 3%. Because also what happened is Sally's family was paying $8,000 for kindergarten, the vouchers hit, and their tuition got raised to $13,000. So the school said, we'll take the $8,000 voucher, but we still want $5,000 more. Those are frustrated Republican-performing families across the state of Florida. Those are Republican deep red families who are saying, wait a minute, I just got hoodwinked by this Republican voucher system. And then the third piece, I talked about it earlier, is if you're going to accept private or public money for private education, you're a voucher school, you have to provide the same services, and most importantly, that means providing IEPs to any student who needs it. The story I told about the first grader who couldn't read and was being held back and might face expulsion is a real story in our life. Not our children, but a very close family to ours. That's real. And shame on the private school who says, we'll take the state money, we'll take the voucher, we'll take your kid. But when your kid needs us, we're going to kick them out? No more. No more. I think if there's a place for the language to change a little bit in vouchers from 10 or 20 years ago, it's to say, okay, we're going to recognize public and private schools as being education partners to Florida families. But then we're going to discuss what the rules look like as education partners, because right now, private schools who receive vouchers simply don't have the rules sufficient to honor taxpayer investment in the education services they're providing.
And forbid the legislators from opening private schools.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. We have just time for a few more questions here.
No. Next.
Could you hear me? Oh. All right, I'm Bill Green. I'm a local. I appreciate your optimism for 2026. I'm looking for guidance. I'm looking for strategy. I'm looking for tactics. The Republican, the extreme right, has the Heritage Foundation, they have the Federalist Society, they have Project 2025, as dire and as despicable as it is, but they have a plan.
Yeah.
I do not hear from Chuck Schumer, I do not hear from Jeffries. I'm wondering who our leadership is out there. Who is going to take the bull by the horns? Who? You're doing it locally.
Right.
Oh, well and good. We win, and hopefully you'll announce, all right, we'll have some guidance and direction. I don't hear guidance and direction on a national basis. I'm wondering what you feel, because whatever you do has to be aligned with them, or vice versa, if you come up with a solution, so to speak. So I'm just frustrated because I'm not hearing anything from that level.
Look, I agree with you. Part of this, I would say, is historically consistent with the first year after a party loses a presidential race. There is a void of leadership. That's true. And I think particularly for Chuck Schumer and other people who have been in Washington a long time, I don't think they see the urgency. They at least don't convey the urgency to people. I think Hakeem Jeffries gets it, but I think we need more Cory Bookers in politics. We need more Maxwell Frost in politics. And so I think as we wait to see the infrastructure, I would look for two things. First, largely among the field of potential presidential candidates on the Democratic side, you're going to see them testing different messages and try to see how do we build a coalition. I think we've identified in Florida how to build a coalition. I think in Michigan, Jocelyn Benson and others have identified how to build a coalition. I think you will hopefully see new leaders and new voices emerge that can begin to win hearts and minds. The one piece that I think is critically missing, and resources are finite, but I really think we have to treat each election cycle as we're already in it. We're in 2-year election cycles. And what I would love to see from the large Democratic donor community across the country is an investment in paid media right now, because Democrats are not going to outcompete Donald Trump in earned media. It's still the first 100 days or so of a new administration. Democrats need to be on the airwaves in your phones with commercials and messages as though it's last October or next October. Not messages saying send me $20, but messages that look like a campaign commercial, like we are in a campaign cycle right now to change hearts and minds. I don't think we're there yet. I agree with your anxiety. The clock's ticking and we've got to get there. What I do believe, and this goes to the how do you deal with the fire hose, we each can only do what's within reach for each of us. And we've got to commit to doing what's within reach for each of us. And together, I think if we do that, we got a shot. But I don't think we're there yet. I'm not here to put a salve on it and say you're wrong. I think you're exactly right.
Okay, I'm sorry to say that Armando is going to get the last question. We have to turn this room back over to the sanctuary. But I'm making an executive decision that Mr. Jolly will
we're going to stick around.
Shake hands and
we're going to stick around till absolutely. We're going to stick around. So.
Okay, my name is Melinda Perez, and I just want to say for people that weren't here in 2008, I ran for supervisor election, but I campaigned for Barack Obama, and he won in Flagler County. So we do have a coalition in Flagler County and Florida. in 2008. The messaging is a real problem. I don't know if maybe you have some strategies from being a Republican that you might be able to bring to the Democratic Party. And also, have you had an impact or interest from Republicans? Because we're all suffering with the president that we have, with the Congress, with the Senate being Republican. Do you see, like, are there Republicans in this room? You can raise your hand. I think that we have to have good messaging, and I mean, I listen to you all the time, but I think that's a big part of it, to have a strategy. And I know everybody does their part, but we have to be very aggressive, because there's no way that he should be in office right now.
Look, I agree with you. I'll take the last part of that question, and thank you for the courage to raise your hand, Republicans. I often do this in town halls. I didn't do it tonight, but I'll say, for how many people, is this your first town hall or your first organizing event? A lot of people are coming out for the first time. And then I'll ask, how many NPAs or independents are there? And there's usually a lot, right? And so what I also know is just through the language and reaction, we also are seeing Republicans come out. My Republican doctor said to me, what is this guy doing in Washington? Next week, he's going to come to a fundraising event for our political committee, right? A Republican coming out. So the answer to that is yes. I agree with you on language, and I don't think there's a perfect fit or a perfect answer to what's the language of a campaign. Ultimately, successful campaigns meet voters exactly where they're at in that moment. It's what Barack Obama did with hope and change in the midst of a war-weary nation, in the midst of an economic collapse following 8 years of an incumbent president. I actually think that sets up this environment very similarly. Right? We're going to be in the 6th year of Donald Trump in this election. Essentially, we're going to have a weary nation over the politics of division and an economy where they haven't been able to get ahead. And so what does it look like to meet that moment? That's where in state gubernatorial races, I look at them like big mayor races. It's about the affordability crisis. You know, when we talk about the fights of 2 years ago and the fight over marginalized communities, we are going to be the party that lifts everybody up, and we are going to fight for everybody. But we might be the party that says, more importantly, we're going to make sure that everybody, regardless of your walk of life, is going to have access to affordable housing and health care and a good education. And that's what's going to bring our community together. I will close with this, and Heather's right. You know, people say, what can I do next in terms of our decision? We will decide in the next 4 or 5 weeks. We will be asking people, if we decide to do this, to mobilize, to help, to sign up, all the traditional things of a campaign. But ultimately, what I'm going to ask people to do is to believe. To believe. We are each in this room tonight because we do believe. We believe change is possible. Think about it. Do some soul searching. It might be anger that motivates you. It might be fear that motivates you. It might be concern for your kids or grandkids. But if you did not believe, you wouldn't be here. If you did not believe, you would have given up. We are in this because we believe. And if we step into this governor's race, my first ask of the willing is going to be believe. Just believe. I believe we can do it as a coalition. I appreciate that you all were each here tonight. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.